Welcome everyone to this video where we're going to be looking at how to ask good questions in English as a legal professional. So we have a lot to cover today, so let's get straight into it. And I'm going to first of all ask you, do you relate to any of these statements? Maybe you want to manage conflict better in English. Maybe you find it difficult to make conversation in English. And maybe you want to make a good impression with your colleagues from other cultures. So, with better questions, with asking good questions in English, it's going to help you to achieve all of these things and much, much more. So, let's look at the four questions that you can use as a legal professional in English that is really going to help you with this. So, we've got four of them: open questions, closed questions, funnel questions, and probing questions. So we're going to look at each one of these in detail. I'm going to give you when you would use it and some examples as well. So let's look at open questions first. Mm, Open questions. There we go. So you would use open questions for fact finding, finding out information, conversation and networking, and brainstorming. And with an open question, it's very important to remember to use the five W's and the one H, the question words in English: what, where, when, who, why, and how. That makes it open. And the idea of it being open is that the person answering the question is not going to be able to answer you with just yes or no. They're going to have to give more details. And so let's look at just some of these examples. Each example is linked to each use. So the first one for fact finding, you could say, what are the main challenges you have with this product? So this is an open question where you're forcing the respondent to respond to you in one or many sentences to give you more information. So yeah, very effective as opposed to closed questions, which we're going to look in a moment. But this is really going to open up the dialogue, open up the conversation. Like in the second one for conversation and networking, how do you know the host? How do you know the host? You could ask this in a networking scenario where you don't really know what to say, or how do you know the host, or how do you know this organization? It's always a good one to ask. So asking those kinds of questions with how or what or where, it's going to encourage the person to respond with a few sentences of an answer. So you're going to get more information, or in this case, you're going to make some conversation and get that conversation going and help you to network. Okay, and the last one is describe the circumstances in more detail. So this is, brainstorming. It also kind of is fact finding, but if you are brainstorming some information or ideas with someone, you could also use the describe that. It doesn't just have to be those question words. You can also use something like describe or tell me about. That's also possible. Okay, so that's the first one, open question. Let's look now at closed question. Closed questions. So what we use these for is for checking information, closing a deal, and making a decision. And we should use these closed questions sparingly, as it can be seen as too rude and direct when you ask a closed question, because a closed question is about getting a yes or no answer. And so, sometimes it's best to to either soften how you ask that question or ask an open question beforehand. We're going to go into that in a few minutes when we talk about funnel questions. But closed questions, they are still very useful when you really want to get that information, when you really want to close that deal. So they're used with the auxiliary form. We're using with is, are, do. So here are some examples. So for the checking information, is he satisfied with the decision? It's a yes or no answer, very direct, but it's very effective in getting that key information. Are you happy to move forward? Closing a deal. Are you happy to move forward? Yes or no? Sometimes on a call when you're with a potential signing a potential client, it can be difficult to close that deal. But when you ask with a direct question, it really helps to either get them to say yes or no. And making a decision as well. Do you agree to signing the contract? So again, there's no escaping. They have to provide you with that yes or no. So these closed questions can be very effective when used well. But as I said, use sparingly because you don't want to be too rude and direct, and especially in English speaking cultures, that's very important not to come across as too direct. So, softening your English, which can be helpful, and that's another video that I could do, but using could you tell me that you have agreed to signing the contract? Would you mind telling me that you're happy to move forward? These kinds of softening phrases to help with this kind of closed question. Okay, let's move on to the next two, which are a bit more complex, but they're very interesting. So let's look at funnel questions. So a funnel, funneling through the information, it's a very good strategy or process for cross-examination in court, building relationships, and diffusing conflict. So very good for conflict management. And the process is that you first start with the open question. Remember, I was saying that the open question can help to kind of to build that relationship, like it's used in conversation and networking. So, open question to establish the situation, and I'll be giving you an example in a moment. So, that open question with the five W's and the H. Um, and then you move on to an action focused question to get more information. And then finally, you end with the close question to get that final explanation. So let's look at an example. It will make more sense. So when you ask an open question to establish the situation, let's look at the first one. When did you get the call from the client? Okay, so that's an open question with when. So you're going to get the timeline of when this person received the call from the client. Then we move on to an action focused question with the same. So we're looking at the first example here. What exactly did the client say? So it's another open question, but it's more focused on the action. So what exactly? Often we're going to be using like what exactly, um, you know, what are you doing now, or tell me more, that kind of thing. So you're focusing more on the action. What exactly did the client say? And you finished with a closed question to get an explanation. Is it possible that the client is not satisfied with the work? So, yes or no. This is a way to close it to get that final explanation. But you see, the magic with the funnel is that maybe we might have originally started with, so the client isn't satisfied with the work because that is the thing that is at the back of our mind. We want to get the answer to the question that is the client not satisfied with the work? But by building it up, starting with an open question to establish the situation, then moving into more action focus to get more information, and then finally get the explanation at the end, it's much more effective, much more tactful. And so, as a lawyer, this really helps. Let's look at the second example. So, ask an open question. How do you find working on this team? Okay. And then you go into more action focused. What projects are you currently working on? And then you finally go to a closed question. Do you think you could take on more work? Okay. So that's the, question that might be difficult to broach at the beginning. If you start a conversation and say, look, I have a lot of extra clients, a big caseload. And so I was wondering if you could take on more work. That might not be met in the same way as building up starting with that open question, establishing how that person feels. How do you find working on the team? What are you currently working on to establish like how they feel about their work, how much time they have, and then finally coming in with that answer. It's a very, very effective way of, as I said, and let's just go back to it. Yeah, cross-examination in court if you do that, building relationships and diffusing conflict. This will help a lot if you can remember to do this. Okay, and the final type of question we're going to look at today is called probing questions. These are really important for lawyers. So they're good for clarifying an issue and problem solving. So to probe is to really focus, to force, to focus on something. And there's a really good process for a probing question from the five whys technique. It was developed by the Toyota founder Sakishi Toyoda. I guess that his surname was inspired for Toyota. Oh wow, my Japanese pronunciation is terrible. Okay. So yeah, this is very simple but very effective. So what we do is we identify the problem and we follow with five why questions or until the problem is solved or the issue is clarified. So let's look at the first problem. So the problem is that your client has decided to stop working with you. So you're going to start asking why questions. So you've established the problem and now you're going to ask them why, why. And obviously you want to be careful with not overloading someone, irritating them. But as much as you think is comfortable or how many whys you can do, I've only put three here, which I thought was appropriate for this problem. So let's read them. So why have you decided to pull out? And so they might say something like, "Because I'm not satisfied with the way things are going." "Why are you not satisfied?" "Because things are taking too long to do, and I really want things done quickly." "And why is it important that this is done quickly?" Okay, and then you'll get to the crux of the issue. You're going to get some important feedback on why this is so important, and maybe uh, find some steps and solutions on how you can help that client and keep that client so that they continue to work with you. The second problem, so we're going to brainstorm this together. If you have any ideas, put them in the comments. So the problem is your colleague does not want to use the new software. So what do you think would be some good why questions? I'll give you a minute to think about that. Um, yeah, what do you think would be some good why questions for this? So one of them could be, why don't you want to use the new software? You could start with that. Uh, and they might say, because it's really complicated to use. You can say, why is it so complicated to use? Because there is a very long process to doing things, and you need to um, find different documents to process the software. It's very time consuming. And then you can ask, why why do you think it's so time consuming? And they could give you a really good answer about the software and why it's not working so well, and maybe a solution on how it can be improved. So yeah, that's another problem where you can ask the why questions. Okay, so that is it for this video where we looked at, and let's go back just to review. We looked at open questions. So open questions are very good for networking, for fact finding, for building a relationship. So these questions are with when, what, where, why, how, um, and the closed questions then, on the other hand, they're with auxiliary. They start with auxiliary, so like do, is, are, and they're trying to get a yes or no answer. So this is very good for closing a deal, for confirming information, making a decision. These kinds of questions are very good. Then you have the funnel question, and this is a very tactful way of getting an answer, influencing people. Um, yeah, it's a very good way for like cross-examination in court. But even if you don't do cross-examination in court, if you are trying to, and I'm going to just look at it for a moment. If you're, yeah, trying to build a relationship or diffuse a conflict, this is a very good one to use. And finally, the probing question. And the probing question is about clarifying an issue and problem solving. So this is very good for doing that because you're asking a lot of why questions and you are clarifying a situation by continuing to ask the why questions. And it's a very simple but very effective way of doing it. Of course, you need to be careful and be tactful and not overuse it. But I think these are going to be very helpful for you as a legal professional for doing your work, for managing conflict, for building relationships with people, for problem solving, for making a good impression across cultures. Remember not to be too direct in English as well. And I will try to do a video on how you can soften your English in the future. So thank you for watching, and I will talk to you